"Everyone's staying home," my mom texted. "Bad weather. Christmas dinner is canceled. Stay safe." I stared at my phone, sitting in my apartment in Nashville, Tennessee, feeling the familiar sting of disappointment settle in my chest. It was Christmas Eve, and I had been looking forward to being with my family for weeks. The snow had been falling steadily all day, but it didn't seem that bad. Still, if Mom said it was unsafe, I trusted her judgment. My name is Millie. I'm 29 years old, and I've spent most of my adult life trying to earn a place in my family that I'm not sure I'll ever really have. I work as a physical therapist at a rehabilitation center, and while I love my job, it doesn't come with the prestige or the paycheck that my younger sister Vanessa's career as a pharmaceutical sales representative does. She's always been the favorite, the one who could do no wrong, the golden child who made our parents proud just by existing. I replied to Mom's text. "That's too bad. Stay warm, everyone. Love you all." My apartment felt emptier than usual that night. I had bought presents for everyone, thoughtful gifts I had spent weeks selecting. A cashmere scarf for Mom because she was always complaining about the cold. A nice leather wallet for Dad because his old one was falling apart. And for Vanessa, a beautiful set of art supplies because she used to paint before her career consumed all her time. They were wrapped and sitting under my small Christmas tree, ready to be delivered tomorrow. I made myself a simple dinner, nothing fancy, just pasta with marinara sauce, and settled on the couch with a holiday movie. The apartment was quiet except for the sound of the television and the occasional gust of wind rattling the windows. I kept telling myself it was fine, that family dinners could be rescheduled, that there would be other Christmases. But deep down, I felt the old familiar ache of being left out, of being the afterthought. Around 9 o'clock, I scrolled through social media, mostly out of boredom. That's when I saw it, a photo posted by my cousin Janet, who I knew was close with Vanessa. The image showed my entire family gathered in what I immediately recognized as Vanessa's living room. There was the distinctive brick fireplace, the expensive furniture she had just bought, and the chandelier I had heard so much about. My parents were there, beaming. My aunts and uncles were there. Even my grandmother's sister, Aunt Louise, was there. And they were opening presents. My heart stopped. I zoomed in on the photo, my hands shaking. There were piles of beautifully wrapped gifts, champagne glasses in everyone's hands, and smiles all around. The caption read, "Perfect holiday with the family. So blessed." I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. They hadn't canceled Christmas because of bad weather. They had canceled it for me. They had lied to keep me away. And they were all together at Vanessa's house, celebrating without me. I sat there in shock, staring at the photo. Why would they do this? What had I done to deserve being excluded from my own family's Christmas celebration? The hurt quickly turned to anger, then to something colder, a determination to understand what was really going on. I noticed something else in the photo. On the coffee table, among the opened presents, were several items that looked expensive and antique. A jewelry box I recognized, a set of silver candlesticks, and what appeared to be some old photographs in ornate frames. My breath caught in my throat. Those were Grandma's things. My grandmother had passed away 6 months ago, and she had been the one person in the family who always made me feel valued. She had left behind a small estate, mostly personal items and keepsakes she had collected over her lifetime. The will had been read, but I hadn't been present because I was out of town for a work conference. Mom had told me that Grandma had left everything to be divided equally among the grandchildren, and that we would sort through it all together after the holidays. But looking at this photo, it was clear that sorting had already begun, without me. I took a screenshot of the photo and saved it to my phone. Then I replied to Mom's text with a message that took every ounce of self-control I had to write calmly. "Glad you're all safe. Hope the weather clears up soon." I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. The exclusion was one thing, but the inheritance issue was something else entirely. If they had divided Grandma's belongings without me, that wasn't just hurtful, it was potentially illegal. Grandma's will had been specific about equal distribution among grandchildren. I had a copy of it in my files somewhere. By the time morning came, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to confront them immediately. I was going to be smart about this. I was going to find out exactly what they had done. And then, I was going to make sure they faced the consequences. Christmas morning arrived with pale winter sunlight filtering through my curtains. I got up, made coffee, and started doing what I should have done months ago. I began investigating. First, I pulled out the copy of Grandma's will that her lawyer had sent me. I read through it carefully, highlighting the relevant sections. It was clear. Her estate was to be divided equally among her 4 grandchildren, me, Vanessa, and our 2 cousins, Janet and Stuart. The executor was supposed to be a neutral third party, a lawyer named Patricia Hoffman. But I noticed that my mother had been listed as a co-executor to help with the personal items since she knew what everything was. I had trusted Mom to handle things fairly. That had clearly been a mistake. I thought back to my childhood, trying to pinpoint when things had started to go wrong between Vanessa and me. We had been close once, when we were little. I remembered playing together, sharing secrets, defending each other against the world. But somewhere around the time Vanessa turned 16 and I was 18, everything changed. She became competitive, always trying to outdo me, always seeking more attention from our parents, and they gave it to her willingly. When I chose to study physical therapy, Dad had made comments about it being a nice, practical career for someone who wants to help people. But when Vanessa went into pharmaceutical sales, he bragged about her ambition and her 6-figure income potential. When I bought my modest apartment, Mom said it was cozy. When Vanessa bought her house with the chandelier and the brick fireplace, they threw her a housewarming party and invited half the neighborhood. I had tried not to be bitter about it. I had tried to focus on my own life, my own achievements, my own happiness. But it was hard when every family gathering felt like a celebration of Vanessa and a reminder of my own inadequacy in their eyes. Grandma had been different. She had always treated us equally, always made sure we both felt loved and valued. When I graduated from my physical therapy program, she was the one who threw me a party. When I got my first job, she was the one who sent me a congratulatory card with a check inside and a note that said she was proud of me. She never compared us, never played favorites, never made me feel less than. That's why her will had specified equal distribution. She wanted us to be treated fairly, even after she was gone. And Mom and Vanessa had violated that. I decided to call Aunt Louise, Grandma's sister. She was in her 70s but sharp as a tack, and she had always been kind to me. If anyone would tell me the truth about what was going on, it would be her. "Millie, dear," she answered, her voice warm. "Merry Christmas. I'm so sorry you couldn't make it yesterday. The weather was frightful, wasn't it?" I felt a spike of anger but kept my voice calm. "Actually, Aunt Louise, I'd love to talk to you about that, and about Grandma's estate. Do you have a few minutes?" There was a pause. "Of course, sweetheart. What's on your mind?" I saw photos from yesterday's gathering at Vanessa's house. It looked like some of Grandma's things were being distributed. I was under the impression that we were all supposed to go through everything together after the holidays, with the executor present. Another pause, longer this time. "Oh, Millie, I thought you knew about the change in plans. Your mother said you had agreed to let Vanessa handle most of the distribution since you were so busy with work." My grip tightened on the phone. "I never agreed to that. I was never even asked." Aunt Louise's voice became concerned. "That's very strange. Your mother was quite clear about it. She said you had specifically told her that you didn't have time to deal with sorting through old keepsakes and that Vanessa could take care of it. She said you would just accept whatever was set aside for you." "That's not true," I said, my voice shaking now. I never said any of that. In fact, I specifically asked Mom when we would all get together to go through Grandma's things. She told me it would be after the holidays and everyone would be involved. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, Aunt Louise spoke, and her voice was troubled. "Millie, I think there might be something going on that you need to look into. I noticed yesterday that Vanessa seemed to be taking quite a few valuable items. Grandma's jewelry, some of the antique silver, and several pieces of artwork. Your mother kept saying it was all according to the will, but I have to admit, it seemed like Vanessa was getting more than her fair share." My suspicions were confirmed. "What about the executor? Was Patricia Hoffman there?" "No, she wasn't. Your mother said Patricia had approved everything in advance, and that it was fine to proceed without her. But now I'm wondering if that was true." "Thank you for telling me, Aunt Louise. I really appreciate your honesty." "Millie, dear, if something improper is happening, you need to do something about it. Your grandmother would want her wishes honored. She loved all of you equally, and she would be heartbroken to think that anyone was being treated unfairly." After I hung up, I sat in silence, processing everything. My family hadn't just excluded me from Christmas. They had actively lied to everyone to justify taking Grandma's inheritance without my involvement. And they had used my supposed agreement as cover for their scheme. I needed proof. I needed documentation. And I needed to act carefully. The day after Christmas, I received the call I had been expecting. Mom's number flashed on my screen, and I let it ring 3 times before answering, keeping my voice light and unbothered. "Hi, Mom. Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas, sweetheart," she said, her tone overly cheerful in that way that made my skin crawl. "How was your day yesterday? Did you stay warm?" "Oh, it was fine. Quiet, but fine. I watched some movies, had a nice dinner. How about you? Did the weather clear up enough for you to do anything?" There was the briefest hesitation. "Oh, you know how it is. We just stayed home, had a simple meal. Nothing special." I waited a beat, giving her the chance to come clean. She didn't take it. "That's nice," I said. "I'm glad you were safe. Actually, Millie, I'm calling because I wanted to talk to you about Grandma's estate. We had the executor review everything, and it turns out there's been some sorting done. We wanted to make sure you got your share." "Oh? I thought we were going to do that together after the holidays. What changed?" "Well, Patricia Hoffman said it would be easier to handle it in stages, and since Vanessa had the most space to store things temporarily, we thought it made sense to start the process at her house. Don't worry. Everything has been documented and divided fairly. We have a box of items set aside for you." A box. 1 box out of an entire estate. I felt my jaw clench. "That's interesting, Mom, because I spoke with Aunt Louise yesterday. She mentioned that there was a gathering at Vanessa's house on Christmas Day, the day you told me was canceled because of bad weather. She said several valuable items were distributed, and that Vanessa seemed to receive quite a lot of them." The silence on the other end was deafening. "Millie, I can explain." "Can you?" I cut her off, my voice still calm but with an edge now. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you lied about canceling Christmas, so you could exclude me while Vanessa helped herself to Grandma's inheritance. Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" "It's not like that," Mom said quickly, her tone defensive now. "Vanessa just needed some of those things for her house, and we thought—" "You thought what? That I wouldn't notice? That I wouldn't care? Or that I'd just accept whatever scraps you decided to throw my way?" "Millie, you're overreacting. This is family business, and we were trying to handle it efficiently. Vanessa has been so helpful with everything, and you've been so busy with work. We didn't want to burden you." "Burden me?" "Mom, Grandma's will specifically states that everything is to be divided equally among the 4 grandchildren. That means me, Vanessa, Janet, and Stuart. Not just Vanessa and whoever else you decide to favor this week." "Watch your tone, young lady," Mom snapped. "We did nothing wrong. Patricia approved everything." Then you won't mind if I call Patricia myself to verify that, will you? Another pause. This one felt different, heavier, more worried. Millie, please don't make this into a bigger issue than it needs to be. Family is more important than material things. You're absolutely right, Mom. Family is more important. Which is exactly why it hurts so much that you would lie to me, exclude me, and try to cheat me out of my inheritance. Grandma would be devastated if she knew what you were doing. We'll get you your share, Mom said, her voice tight. There's no need to involve lawyers or make this unpleasant. It's already unpleasant, Mom. You made sure of that when you decided I didn't matter enough to include in my own family's Christmas celebration. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from righteous anger. I immediately called Patricia Hoffman's office, fully expecting to get voicemail since it was the day after Christmas, but to my surprise, she answered. Patricia Hoffman speaking. Hello, Ms. Hoffman. This is Millie, one of the beneficiaries of my grandmother's estate. I have some concerns about the distribution process, and I was hoping you could clarify a few things for me. Of course, Millie. What can I help you with? My mother told me that you had approved an early distribution of assets at my sister Vanessa's home on Christmas Day, and that everything was documented and handled properly. Is that accurate? There was a long pause. I'm sorry, but I have no idea what you're talking about. I haven't approved any distribution of assets. In fact, I've been trying to schedule a meeting with all the beneficiaries for weeks, but your mother kept saying everyone's schedules were too busy. The estate settlement is still pending. My heart raced. So there was no approval for Vanessa to take possession of items from the estate? Absolutely not. As co-executor, your mother has access to the estate for the purpose of cataloging and preserving assets. But she has no authority to distribute anything without my approval, and without all beneficiaries present. If items have been removed from the estate, that's a serious problem. What kind of problem are we talking about? Potentially, it could be considered theft or misappropriation of estate assets. At the very least, it's a violation of her fiduciary duty as co-executor. Millie, if what you're telling me is true, we need to address this immediately. Can you provide me with evidence of what happened? I thought of the screenshots, Aunt Louise's testimony, and the documented lies in the text messages. Yes, I said. I can provide plenty of evidence. Good. I'm going to need you to send me everything you have. And Millie, don't tell your mother or sister that we've spoken. Let me handle this through the proper legal channels. After I hung up, I sat back and took a deep breath. This was it, the moment where everything would either fall apart or come together. My family had made their choice when they decided to exclude and deceive me. Now it was time for them to face the consequences. Over the next 3 days, I meticulously compiled everything I had, screenshots of the social media posts showing my family at Vanessa's house on Christmas Day, the text messages from Mom claiming bad weather had canceled our dinner, a recorded phone conversation with Aunt Louise where she detailed what she had witnessed at the gathering. I had called her back and asked if she would be willing to give a statement, and she agreed without hesitation. I even drove by Vanessa's house and took photos of the expensive new items visible through her front windows, items I recognized from Grandma's house, including an antique mirror and a distinctive brass lamp that had sat in Grandma's living room for decades. Patricia Hoffman called me back 2 days later, her voice grim. Millie, I've reviewed everything you sent me, and this is far worse than I initially thought. I've also pulled the estate inventory that your mother was supposed to be maintaining, and there are significant discrepancies. Items that should be listed as part of the estate are missing entirely from the documentation. What does that mean? I asked, though I already knew the answer. It means your mother and sister have been systematically removing valuable items from the estate without proper documentation or approval. This isn't just a family dispute anymore. This is fraud. I'm going to have to petition the court to remove your mother as co-executor and to order a full accounting of all estate assets. How long will that take? Given the evidence you've provided, I can fast-track this. We should be able to get an emergency hearing within the next week. The court will likely issue an order requiring your mother and sister to return all items taken from the estate and to provide a full accounting. If they can't produce the items or provide adequate documentation, they could face serious legal consequences. A week felt like an eternity, but I knew it was necessary to do this right. What should I do in the meantime? Document everything. If they contact you, record it if it's legal in Tennessee, which it is, since Tennessee is a one-party consent state for recording conversations. Don't confront them directly, and most importantly, don't let them know that you've involved me or that you have evidence. Let them believe they've gotten away with it. That last part was the hardest. I wanted to scream at them, to demand answers, to make them acknowledge what they had done. But I understood the strategy. Let them get comfortable. Let them think they had won, and then pull the rug out from under them when they least expected it. The next day, Vanessa called me. I almost didn't answer. But then I remembered Patricia's advice about documentation. I hit record on my phone app before accepting the call. "Hey, Millie," Vanessa said, her voice falsely bright. "How are you doing?" "I'm fine, Vanessa. What's up?" "I just wanted to reach out about Grandma's stuff. Mom said you were upset about how things were handled, and I wanted to clear the air. You know how Mom can be. She sometimes doesn't communicate things very well." I bit back a bitter laugh. "Is that what you think happened? A communication problem?" "Well, yeah. I mean, Mom told us you didn't have time to deal with sorting through everything, so we tried to help by getting started. We have a box of things set aside for you. Some photo albums, a few pieces of costume jewelry, some kitchen items. Nothing major, but things we thought you'd like." "Photo albums and costume jewelry," I repeated slowly. "What about the antique mirror, the brass lamp, the silver candlesticks, the jewelry box with Grandma's real jewelry?" There was a pause. "Those things are being held for now until we can properly appraise them. You know, for estate tax purposes." "At your house?" "It's just temporary storage, Millie. Don't make this into a bigger deal than it is." "A bigger deal? Vanessa, you and Mom lied to me about Christmas being canceled, held a family gathering without me, and distributed Grandma's belongings without the executor present or my knowledge. How exactly is that not a big deal?" Her tone shifted, becoming defensive. "You always do this. You always make everything about you. We were trying to handle things efficiently, and you're turning it into some kind of conspiracy. Maybe if you were more involved in family matters instead of always working, you'd understand how things actually work. I wasn't involved because you deliberately excluded me." "Oh, please, you're so dramatic." "Look, if you want your little box of knickknacks, you can come pick it up whenever. But stop acting like you're being cheated. Mom and I have been doing all the work while you sit back and complain." "Work? You mean taking Grandma's valuables for yourself?" "I'm done with this conversation," Vanessa snapped. "You're being ridiculous. When you're ready to be reasonable, you can call me back." She hung up. I sat there staring at my phone, the recording app still running. I had everything I needed. Her admission that items were at her house, her dismissive attitude about the distribution, and her confirmation that the executor hadn't been involved. I sent the recording to Patricia immediately. Her response came within an hour. "This is perfect. I'm filing the emergency petition today. The hearing is set for Monday morning at 9. Be prepared. Your mother and sister are going to be served with papers requiring them to appear in court and to explain what they've done with the estate assets. This is going to get ugly, Millie. Are you sure you want to go through with this?" I thought about Grandma, about how she had always treated me with love and respect, about how she had wanted us all to be treated fairly. I thought about the years of being second best in my parents' eyes, of being excluded and dismissed. I thought about the deliberate lies they had told to keep me away from Christmas, while they divided up what was rightfully meant to be shared. "I'm sure," I typed back. "They made their choice. Now they can face the consequences." That weekend was torturous. I knew the papers would be served on Sunday. Patricia had arranged for a process server to deliver them to both Mom and Vanessa. I imagined their reactions, the panic that would set in when they realized what was happening. Part of me felt guilty for taking such a drastic step, but a larger part of me knew this was the only way to get justice. Sunday evening, my phone exploded with messages and calls. Mom, Dad, Vanessa, even Janet and Stuart. I ignored all of them, just as Patricia had instructed. Let them panic. Let them scramble. Let them finally understand what it felt like to be powerless and excluded. Monday morning arrived cold and clear. I dressed carefully in a professional Navy suit that made me look capable and serious, the kind of outfit that said I wasn't someone to be dismissed. I arrived at the courthouse 30 minutes early, my stomach churning with anxiety and anticipation. Patricia met me in the lobby, a leather briefcase in hand, and a determined expression on her face. She was in her 50s, with sharp eyes and an air of competence that immediately put me at ease. "Are you ready for this?" she asked. "As ready as I'll ever be." "Good. Remember, stay calm. Answer the judge's questions honestly and directly, and let me handle the legal arguments. Your mother and sister are going to try to make this about family drama and hurt feelings. We need to keep the focus on the facts, the missing estate assets, the fraudulent distribution, and the violation of fiduciary duty." We entered the courtroom, and I saw them immediately. Mom, Dad, and Vanessa, huddled together near the defendant's table with their lawyer, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit who looked annoyed to be there. The moment Mom saw me, her face contorted with anger and something else, fear. "How could you do this?" she hissed as I walked past. "This is your own family." I didn't respond. I took my seat next to Patricia and stared straight ahead, refusing to engage. The judge entered, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, and everyone rose. "Please be seated," she said, settling into her chair and opening the file in front of her. "This is an emergency petition filed by Patricia Hoffman, executor of the estate of Eleanor Grant, requesting the removal of co-executor Catherine Grant and the return of estate assets. Ms. Hoffman, please proceed." Patricia stood and laid out the case methodically and devastatingly. She presented the evidence: the social media posts, the text messages, the recorded phone calls, Aunt Louise's written statement, and the inventory discrepancies. She showed photos of items that should have been in the estate inventory, but were instead visible in Vanessa's home. She played the recording of Vanessa admitting that items were being held at her house without proper documentation or executor approval. I watched Mom's and Vanessa's faces as each piece of evidence was presented. Mom went from angry to pale to nearly gray. Vanessa's jaw was clenched so tight, I thought her teeth might crack. Their lawyer was frantically taking notes, clearly realizing this case was far worse than he had been led to believe. "Your Honor," Patricia concluded, "the evidence clearly shows that Catherine Grant, in her capacity as co-executor, has violated her fiduciary duty to the estate and to the beneficiaries. She deliberately excluded one beneficiary, Millie, from the distribution process, lied about the circumstances to justify this exclusion, and allowed her other daughter, Vanessa, to take possession of valuable estate assets without proper documentation or approval. This constitutes fraud and potential theft. I am requesting that the court immediately remove Ms. Catherine Grant as co-executor, order the return of all estate assets currently in the possession of Vanessa Grant, and require a full forensic accounting of the estate." The judge turned to Mom's lawyer. "Counselor, your response?" He stood, but he looked uncomfortable. "Your Honor, my clients acknowledge that there may have been some irregularities in the handling of the estate distribution. However, this was never intended to be fraudulent. Ms. Catherine Grant simply thought she was acting in the best interests of the family by starting the sorting process early. She meant no harm." "Meant no harm?" the judge repeated, her tone sharp. "She lied to her own daughter about a canceled Christmas dinner so she could facilitate the unauthorized distribution of estate assets. She failed to document valuable items that were removed from the estate. She allowed one beneficiary to take possession of property that should have been equally divided among 4 beneficiaries. Counselor, this isn't a matter of good intentions gone wrong. This is a deliberate pattern of deception and misappropriation. Your Honor, if I may. Mom stood up suddenly, ignoring her lawyer's attempts to pull her back down. This is all a misunderstanding. Millie is twisting everything to make it look worse than it is. She's always been jealous of her sister, and now she's trying to use the legal system to get revenge over a family dispute. Ms. Grant, sit down, the judge ordered. You'll have your chance to testify if your attorney calls you to the stand. But Mom was beyond reason now. She's tearing this family apart over material possessions. Her grandmother would be ashamed of her. I felt something snap inside me. I stood up, and Patricia put a hand on my arm to stop me, but I gently pulled away. Your Honor, may I address that statement? The judge looked surprised, but nodded. Briefly. I turned to face my mother directly. You want to talk about what Grandma would think? Let's talk about it. Grandma spent her whole life treating me and Vanessa equally, making sure we both felt loved and valued, even when you and Dad made it clear that Vanessa was your favorite. She put it in writing, in her will, that everything should be divided equally among all 4 grandchildren, because she knew that was fair. And what did you do? The moment she was gone, you threw that fairness away. You lied to me, excluded me, and tried to cheat me out of my inheritance, all so Vanessa could have more. Don't you dare tell me Grandma would be ashamed of me. She would be heartbroken by what you've done. The courtroom was silent. Mom's face was bright red, tears streaming down her cheeks. Dad sat frozen, staring at his hands. Vanessa looked like she wanted to disappear. The judge's expression was unreadable. Thank you, Ms. Grant. Please be seated. She shuffled through the papers in front of her, then looked up. I've heard enough. Ms. Catherine Grant, you are hereby removed as co-executor of the estate of Eleanor Grant, effective immediately. Ms. Patricia Hoffman will serve as sole executor. Furthermore, I am ordering Vanessa Grant to return all estate assets currently in her possession to Ms. Hoffman within 48 hours. If any items cannot be produced, Ms. Vanessa Grant will be required to compensate the estate for their fair market value. A forensic accountant will be appointed to conduct a full review of the estate, and if any additional discrepancies are found, further legal action may be pursued. She paused, her gaze settling on Mom and Vanessa with clear disapproval. I want to be very clear about something. This court takes fiduciary duty seriously. When someone is entrusted with managing an estate, they have a legal and moral obligation to act in the best interests of all beneficiaries, not just the ones they personally favor. What happened here is a betrayal of that trust and a violation of the decedent's clear wishes. You should both be ashamed of yourselves. The gavel came down with a sharp crack that felt like thunder in the silent courtroom. The aftermath of the hearing hit like a tidal wave. As we left the courtroom, Mom tried to approach me, but Patricia stepped between us. Ms. Catherine Grant, you are no longer to have any contact with my client regarding estate matters. All communication will go through me. If you violate this order, I will seek a restraining order. Mom's face crumpled. Millie, please. You're my daughter. We can work this out as a family. I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt nothing but exhaustion and sadness. We stopped being a family when you decided Vanessa was the only daughter who mattered. You made your choice, Mom. Now you have to live with it. Dad finally spoke up, his voice hoarse. Millie, your mother made a mistake. But this, taking it to court, humiliating us like this is too far. Can't we just forget this whole thing and move on? Forget it? I felt a laugh bubble up, bitter and sharp. Dad, you stood there while Mom lied to me. You participated in the gathering at Vanessa's house, knowing I had been deliberately excluded. You watched Vanessa take Grandma's belongings without saying a word. You're just as guilty as they are. I didn't know it was wrong, he protested weakly. Then you're either lying or you're a fool, and I don't know which is worse." Vanessa finally found her voice, stepping forward with tears streaming down her face. "How can you do this to us? Over things? Over stuff? You're willing to destroy this family over material possessions?" I turned to her, and all the years of resentment, all the hurt and anger and disappointment came pouring out. "This isn't about the stuff, Vanessa. This is about respect. This is about being treated like I matter. You've spent your entire adult life being the favorite, being the golden child, getting everything handed to you while I worked twice as hard for half the recognition. And even that wasn't enough for you. You had to take the one thing, the one person, who treated us equally, and use her death as an opportunity to take more. That's not fair," Vanessa sobbed. You did." I cut her off. "You knew exactly what you were doing. You and Mom planned this together, and you thought I was too stupid or too compliant to fight back. Well, you were wrong." Over the next 2 days, I watched from a distance as chaos unfolded in my family. Patricia called to inform me that Vanessa had returned most of the items, but several high-value pieces were missing, including Grandma's engagement ring, a valuable painting, and an antique necklace. Vanessa claimed she had given them to friends for safekeeping, and couldn't remember which friends. The judge was not amused. A contempt hearing was scheduled, and Vanessa was facing potential jail time if she couldn't produce the missing items. Suddenly, miraculously, she remembered where everything was and returned it all within 24 hours. The forensic accounting revealed even more troubling information. Mom had been skimming money from Grandma's bank accounts in the months before her death. Small amounts at first, but growing larger as Grandma became too ill to monitor her finances. The total came to nearly $20,000, supposedly used for Grandma's care, but with no receipts or documentation to prove it. Patricia filed additional motions to recoup the stolen funds. Mom and Vanessa hired a better lawyer, but the evidence was overwhelming. In the end, they agreed to a settlement rather than face criminal charges. Mom would repay the $20,000, plus interest. Vanessa would pay for the forensic accounting and all legal fees related to the case. Both would be permanently barred from serving as executors or trustees for any estate in the future. But the real punishment was the dissolution of the family itself. My parents' marriage fell apart within a month. Dad, who had always been passive and non-confrontational, couldn't forgive Mom for dragging him into her schemes and making him complicit in the fraud. He filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences, and moved into an apartment across town. Janet and Stuart, my cousins, were horrified when they learned the full extent of what had happened. They had received their shares of the inheritance without issue. It was only me who had been targeted for exclusion. They cut ties with Mom and Vanessa, refusing to attend family gatherings if either of them was present. Stuart even wrote me a letter apologizing for not questioning things sooner, for not realizing I was being treated unfairly. The wider family took sides, and most of them sided against Mom and Vanessa. Aunt Louise was particularly vocal, telling anyone who would listen about the betrayal and the lies. Family gatherings became impossible. There was too much anger, too much hurt, too many burnt bridges. Vanessa's perfect life started crumbling in other ways, too. Her husband, who had apparently been kept in the dark about the extent of her deception, was furious when he learned what she had done. He insisted she see a therapist to address what he called her entitlement issues and her inability to share. Their marriage became strained, and within 6 months, they were separated. Mom, stripped of her role in the family and her marriage, became increasingly isolated. She tried to reach out to me several times, through relatives, through letters, even showing up at my work once. But I refused to engage. Patricia had made it clear that any harassment would result in legal consequences, and eventually, Mom stopped trying. 3 months after the hearing, the estate was finally settled. Everything was divided exactly as Grandma had intended, 4 equal shares among the 4 grandchildren. I received my portion, a collection of jewelry that had belonged to Grandma, some valuable antique furniture, several pieces of artwork, and my share of the liquid assets. But more than that, I received something I hadn't expected. Peace. Aunt Louise called me one evening to tell me she was proud of me. "Your grandmother would be proud too," she said. "You stood up for what was right, even when it was hard, even when it cost you. That takes real courage." "It cost me my family," I said quietly. "No, honey," Aunt Louise corrected gently. "It cost you people who were never really family to begin with. Family doesn't lie to you, doesn't cheat you, doesn't treat you as less than. What you did was set yourself free." I thought about that for a long time after we hung up. She was right. I had spent so many years trying to earn a place in a family that would never value me the way I deserved. I had bent and compromised and accepted scraps of affection, always hoping that if I just tried harder, they would finally see me. But I had been looking for love and acceptance in all the wrong places. 6 months after the court hearing, I was building a life that was truly mine. I had moved to a larger apartment, one that could accommodate the beautiful antique furniture from Grandma's estate. Every piece held a memory, and surrounding myself with them felt like having a piece of her with me every day. The brass lamp that had caused so much trouble now sat on my desk, casting warm light while I read in the evenings. The antique mirror hung in my hallway, and every time I passed it, I remembered Grandma standing in front of it, adjusting her hat before church. Work became a sanctuary. I threw myself into my patients' care, finding purpose in helping people recover their mobility and independence. My boss noticed my renewed energy and dedication, and I was promoted to senior therapist, which came with a significant raise and the opportunity to mentor newer staff members. For the first time in years, I felt valued for who I was and what I contributed. I also started seeing a therapist of my own, not because I was broken, but because I wanted to understand the patterns that had kept me trapped in unhealthy family dynamics for so long. Dr. Sarah Chen helped me recognize that I had been conditioned from childhood to accept less than I deserved, to diminish my own needs and accomplishments to make room for Vanessa's shine. She helped me see that setting boundaries and demanding respect wasn't selfish, it was necessary. "You spent your whole life trying to earn love from people who were never going to give it freely," Dr. Chen told me during one session. "That's not a failure on your part. That's a reflection of their limitations, not yours." It was liberating to finally understand that. But the most unexpected development came from an unlikely source. Stuart, my cousin, reached out to invite me to dinner one evening. We had never been particularly close. He was 5 years older than me, and we had moved in different circles growing up. But the estate situation had brought us together in a new way. "I owe you an apology," Stuart said over pasta at a small Italian restaurant. "I should have noticed what was happening. I should have questioned why you weren't at the Christmas gathering, why things seemed to be moving so fast with the estate distribution. I trusted Aunt Catherine. I didn't think she would do something like that." "It's not your fault," I assured him. "They were very good at making it seem legitimate. Even Aunt Louise didn't fully understand what was happening until I explained it to her. Still, I should have been more aware." He paused, studying his wine glass. "You know, watching you stand up to them, watching you demand what was rightfully yours, it made me think about my own life. I've been letting my father push me around in business decisions, always trying to please him, always worried about disappointing him. You inspired me to set some boundaries of my own." "How did that go?" He laughed. "About as well as you'd expect." He was furious at first. But then something shifted. He actually started respecting me more. It's like he needed to see that I had a backbone before he could take me seriously. We talked for hours that night, sharing stories about our childhoods, about the family dynamics we had both struggled with in different ways. By the end of the evening, I realized I had found something I hadn't expected, a genuine friendship with someone who understood my history because he had lived adjacent to it. Stuart wasn't the only unexpected ally. Janet reached out too, expressing her horror at what Mom and Vanessa had done. I always knew Aunt Catherine favored Vanessa, she told me over coffee. But I never imagined she would go this far. It's one thing to have a favorite child. Lots of parents do, even if they shouldn't. But to actively steal from you? To lie and manipulate and exclude you? That's not just favoritism. That's cruelty. Through these conversations, I began to rebuild a sense of family. Not with the people who had hurt me, but with the ones who showed up for me when it mattered. Aunt Louise became a regular presence in my life, inviting me to lunch once a week and sharing stories about Grandma that I had never heard before. Stuart and Janet included me in family events that deliberately excluded Mom and Vanessa, creating new traditions that weren't tainted by old wounds. One evening, I was organizing some of Grandma's photographs, part of my inheritance that had finally been properly distributed, when I came across a letter tucked into an old album. It was addressed to me, in Grandma's handwriting, dated just a few weeks before she died. My dearest Millie, it read. If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and I hope my affairs have been settled fairly and with love. I want you to know that I've always seen you, really seen you, even when others didn't. You have a strength and integrity that makes me so proud. Your path may be harder than your sister's, but I believe it will ultimately be more rewarding because you've earned everything you have. Don't let anyone diminish your light. Stand up for yourself, even when it's difficult. Especially when it's difficult. I love you, and I believe in you. Always, Grandma. I sat there with tears streaming down my face, holding that letter like the precious gift it was. She had known, even before the estate issues, even before the exclusion and the lies. She had known that I would need this reminder, this validation, this encouragement to be strong. The letter felt like a blessing, a permission slip to continue on the path I had chosen, the path of self-respect and boundaries, and refusing to accept less than I deserved. The 1-year anniversary of Grandma's death arrived on a cold November day. Aunt Louise organized a small memorial gathering at her home, just her, Stuart, Janet, and me. It was intimate and healing, nothing like the circus that the original funeral had been when Mom was still orchestrating everything. We shared stories about Grandma, laughed at her quirks, and raised glasses in her honor. It felt right, this small group of people who genuinely cared about her memory and about treating each other with honesty and respect. She would have loved this, Aunt Louise said, her eyes misty. Just the people who really mattered, gathered in love. As the evening wound down, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me check. It was from Vanessa. I know you probably won't respond to this, but I need you to know something. Daniel left me. He said he can't trust me anymore after everything that happened with Grandma's estate. Mom and Dad are divorced. The whole family has fallen apart. I hope you're happy now. You got your revenge. I stared at the message for a long moment, feeling a complicated mix of emotions. There was no satisfaction in knowing Vanessa's life had fallen apart. I wasn't cruel enough to take pleasure in her pain. But there was also no guilt. She had made her choices, just as I had made mine. I showed the text to Aunt Louise. She read it and shook her head. That girl still doesn't understand, does she? This isn't about revenge. This is about consequences. She was absolutely right. I hadn't set out to destroy my family. I had set out to protect my rights and honor Grandma's wishes. The destruction that followed was a direct result of their own actions, their own lies, their own greed. I didn't respond to Vanessa's text. There was nothing left to say. Instead, I turned my attention to building something positive from the ruins. With part of my inheritance, I established a small scholarship fund at the local community college for students studying physical therapy. Students who, like me, might not have the financial support of their families, but had the determination to succeed anyway. I named it the Eleanor Grant Memorial Scholarship, ensuring that Grandma's legacy would be one of empowerment and opportunity, rather than greed and betrayal. The first scholarship recipient was a young woman named Jasmine, who had aged out of foster care and was working 2 jobs while attending school. When I told her she had received the scholarship, she burst into tears. "You have no idea what this means," she said, her voice shaking. I was about to drop out. I couldn't afford next semester's tuition, and I thought my dream was over. "Dreams don't have to end because of money," I told her, thinking about my own journey. "Sometimes we just need someone to believe in us and give us a chance." Watching Jasmine's face light up with hope and relief, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time, a sense of pure, uncomplicated joy. This was what Grandma would have wanted. Not family members fighting over her possessions, but her legacy being used to help others, to make a real difference in someone's life. Over the following months, I heard through Aunt Louise that Mom had moved to another state, unable to face the shame and judgment in our hometown. Vanessa had taken a job in sales in a different city, starting over where no one knew her story. Dad had remarried quickly, to a woman who, according to Stuart, was kind, but kept him on a very short leash after learning about his passive participation in the estate fraud. I felt nothing when I heard these updates. No triumph, no sadness, just a distant acknowledgement that these were people I used to know. People whose lives no longer intersected with mine. The real turning point came when I received a formal letter from an attorney representing Mom. She was contesting the court's decision, claiming that I had manipulated the evidence and that the judge had been biased. She wanted the estate distribution overturned and the money returned. Patricia called me immediately after receiving her copy of the letter. "This is a baseless claim, and it's not going anywhere," she assured me. The evidence was overwhelming, and the judge's decision was sound. "This is just your mother's last desperate attempt to regain control or punish you for standing up to her. We'll file a response, and the case will be dismissed. But Millie, you need to prepare yourself. This means she's not going to stop. She's not going to accept responsibility, and she's not going to leave you alone." "Then I'll get a restraining order," I said calmly. "I'm done being afraid of her, done worrying about her feelings, done letting her actions control my life. If she wants to waste her money on frivolous lawsuits, that's her choice, but she won't take my peace away again." Patricia's voice was warm with approval. "Good. That's exactly the attitude you need. You've come a long way from the woman who first walked into my office, hurt and confused. You should be proud of yourself." I was proud. For the first time in my life, I was genuinely proud of who I had become. Not because of any external validation, but because I knew I had done the right thing, even when it was hard, even when it cost me. 2 years after that devastating Christmas, I found myself in a place I never could have imagined. My life had transformed not because I sought revenge, but because I chose dignity over dysfunction, truth over twisted loyalty, and self-respect over the desperate need for approval from people who would never give it. The legal harassment from Mom eventually stopped after her frivolous lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice, meaning she couldn't file again on the same grounds. The judge had been harsh in his ruling, stating that her claims were entirely without merit and appeared to be motivated by vindictiveness rather than legitimate legal grievances. She was ordered to pay my legal fees, which finally seemed to break her spirit. I never heard from her again. Vanessa made one last attempt to reconnect, showing up at my apartment building on a rainy evening. The doorman called to ask if I would see her, and I could have said no. Probably should have said no. But curiosity got the better of me. She looked different, older, tired, less polished. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by a simple raincoat and jeans. Her hair, once professionally styled, was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked, for the first time I could remember, ordinary. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness," she said when I opened the door. "I know I don't deserve it. I wanted you to know that I understand now. What we did to you. What I did to you. It was wrong, and it was cruel, and I'm sorry." I stood in the doorway, not inviting her in, not offering comfort. "Why now? Why, after all this time, do you suddenly understand?" She laughed, but it was bitter and sad. Because I'm living it now. I'm the one who's excluded, the one nobody trusts, the one whose calls don't get returned. I'm the one who destroyed my own life because I couldn't just be satisfied with what I had. I had to take yours too. And now, I have nothing. My marriage is over, my reputation is destroyed, and even Mom won't talk to me because she blames me for everything that happened. But you were everything to her, I said, genuinely confused. You were always her favorite. I was useful to her, Vanessa corrected. Just like you were useful in your own way, as the person she could compare me to make me look better. But when I stopped being useful, when I became a liability instead of an asset, she discarded me just as easily as she discarded you. I just didn't see it coming. We stood there in silence for a moment. I felt a strange mix of vindication and pity. She had finally learned the lesson I had learned years ago, that our mother's love was conditional, transactional, and ultimately hollow. I hope you find peace, Vanessa, I said finally. But you're not going to find it with me. I've moved on, and I'm not interested in rebuilding something that was never really there in the first place. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I know. I just needed you to know that you were right about everything. About them, about me, about all of it. She turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, Grandma would be proud of you. She always said you had more strength than the rest of us combined. I just never wanted to believe it. I watched her walk away, her figure disappearing into the rain, and I felt the final piece of the old hurt dissolve. She was right about one thing. Grandma would be proud. Not because I had won, but because I had stood up for what was right when it would have been so much easier to just accept the injustice and move on. The scholarship fund continued to grow. More donors came forward, inspired by Grandma's story and by the mission to help students who were fighting against the odds. We awarded scholarships to 5 students the second year, 10 the third year. Each one had a story of resilience, of determination, of refusing to let circumstances define their future. Watching them succeed became one of my greatest joys. I also reconnected with old friends I had neglected during the years of trying to earn my family's approval. Without the constant drain of toxic relationships, I had energy for genuine connections, for laughter that wasn't tinged with anxiety, for relationships built on mutual respect rather than obligatory blood ties. Stuart became one of my closest friends. He got married, and I stood up as a groomsman in his wedding. A wedding that deliberately excluded Mom and Vanessa, not out of spite, but because their presence would have poisoned the celebration. Janet moved to Nashville for work, and we started a tradition of Sunday brunches, where we talked about everything and nothing, building the kind of sister relationship I had always wanted, but never had with Vanessa. Aunt Louise remained a constant source of wisdom and love. She often told me that watching me stand up for myself had inspired her to be more assertive in her own life. You showed me that it's never too late to demand respect, she said. Even from family. Especially from family. The consequences for Mom and Vanessa were exactly what they deserved. Complete and total isolation from the family they had tried to control and manipulate. Mom lived alone in another state, her attempts to build a new social circle hampered by her reputation, which had followed her even to her new home. Small towns talk, and apparently, someone from our hometown had relatives in her new city who made sure everyone knew what she had done. She worked part-time at a discount store, a far cry from the comfortable life she had enjoyed as a doctor's wife, and she spent her evenings alone in a small apartment, surrounded by none of the beautiful things she had tried so hard to steal from Grandma's estate. Vanessa's consequences were perhaps even more poignant. She had lost everything: her marriage, her home, her social standing, and most importantly, her relationship with the mother who had always favored her. The irony wasn't lost on me, that in trying to take everything from me, she had ended up losing everything herself. She worked in sales in a city where she knew no one, starting from the bottom, and according to Janet, who occasionally heard updates through mutual acquaintances, she struggled daily with the weight of her own choices. Her ex-husband had full custody of their child, having convinced the court that her dishonesty and lack of integrity made her an unsuitable primary parent. She saw her daughter every other weekend, and even those visits were supervised after she had been caught lying to the child about why the family had fallen apart. As for me, I stood in my apartment one Sunday morning, sunlight streaming through the windows, surrounded by Grandma's antiques and the life I had built from the ashes of that devastating Christmas. I thought about the journey, the pain, the betrayal, the fight, the victory, and I realized that my revenge hadn't been about destroying them. It had been about refusing to be destroyed myself. They had tried to make me small, invisible, unworthy, and I had responded by demanding to be seen, valued, and treated with dignity. That was the greatest revenge of all, not their downfall, but my rise. I had learned that sometimes the most powerful act of revenge is simply living well, standing firm, and refusing to accept less than you deserve, no matter who tries to convince you otherwise. And in the end, that lesson was worth more than any inheritance could ever be.